So thank you for joining the PRODUCE Study Results Review Training. My name is Heather Kaplan. I'm one of the co-PIs for the PRODUCE study. And the goal of this training is to take you through the process that you'll need and the information and skills that you'll need to review the final results with your participants that have completed the study. So for the overview of today's training webinar, we're going to talk a little bit about the general goal and objectives of the training, show you how to access the results, talk about reviewing the results with the participant, including key considerations for the results review and the overall organization of how the results are displayed. We're going to go through an example and then provide a recommended approach for reviewing the results. So again, our objectives for today are to show the site PI, so that's you who's listening, how to access the N of 1 results, and teach you and any other clinician that you might share the results with how to explain the results based on the graphs and figures that we provide. So first is accessing the results. So there's two methods for accessing the results. First is to obtain a printout from the research coordinator, and the team at the site coordinating center will work with your research coordinator to ensure they have a PDF of the results review available for you that can be printed out. The second method is to review the results directly in the Eureka administrative platform, which is what we really recommend because it's a little bit more interactive, as you'll see, and you can click and move through different components of the review. For those of you that are going to look at the results in the Eureka platform, that can occur in two different ways. It may occur that you need to access the results through the Stage platform, which is given to you by a link that's will send directly to you. This is only relevant for certain patients where we've had to adjust the data because they didn't follow the outline of the diet switches as was directly specified in the app. So we've had to adjust the dates on the back end to match what in fact they actually did, and those results will be viewable on the Stage platform. If participants proceeded through the study exactly as expected in the app, those results will be available directly in the Eureka panel, but we will let you know in advance of your participant coming in for their results review. So if you're going to access the results directly on the Eureka panel, not on the Stage version, but the live production version of the Eureka panel, first you'll just log in as typical. And then you'll look under the Participants tab, which you can access either at the top or in the middle of the screen. And you'll find your particular participant who's coming in for their results review, which you can either search also by name or by user ID or participant ID. And then when you pull up that individual patient, or in this case, parent for most of our cases, profile, there'll be a tab that you see listed here that you can click on to access their final results. So now reviewing results. So key considerations when you're going to review the results with participants, first is that you don't need to explain every graph to every patient. You can choose what you want to discuss based on what makes the most sense for your patient and really what they're interested in. Another key consideration relates to patient and parent data. So in some cases, both the patient and the parent are tracking. In all cases, the parent will be tracking. If both patients are tracking, the Eureka platform will only present results for one account, and it chooses the account with the most data to make the results meaningful. At this point, we aren't able to provide results for both the parent and the child if they're both tracking, but we still continue to explore whether this is in fact a possibility, and we'll let you know if at some point we're able to provide results for both tracking participants. However, at this point, the results that you'll have come from the participant who has tracked the most and has the most complete results. Also, just to remind you, patients are tracking a number of patient-reported outcome measures. They're tracking stool frequency every day, and with this measure, they're tracking an integer count of the number of stools that they have per day. When we present the results to you, the results are designed to suggest that a lower frequency of stooling is better. However, if this isn't the case for your particular patient, that lower isn't better, then that will be something to consider in reviewing the results. Patients are also also tracking their stool consistency every day. The measure that they're tracking is using the Bristol Stool Scale. So that's an ordinal report of their stool consistency with values ranging from 1, which denotes a hard stool, to 7, which denotes a watery stool. And we're reporting this information as the percent of days where patients are having irregular stools, meaning either a 1, a very hard stool, or a 7, a loose stool on the Bristol Stool Scale. Because patients on the SCD or MSCD can have mashed potato consistency stools, their average stool consistency can be a bit higher. So the measure is designed to look at really abnormal or irregular stools, which would either be very hard or very loose. And again, in this case, results are designed to suggest that a lower percent of days with irregular stools is better. However, if this is not the case for your particular patient, you want to review these results with that in mind. One of the weekly measures that patients are tracking is the PROMIS Pain Interference Measure. And this is a multi-item survey about how pain is interfering with the child's activity. Again, the score is standardized with a mean of 50, and higher scores indicate greater pain interference. Studies have shown that adolescents and parents feel that a 3-point change is clinically meaningful. So throughout the results, you'll see that we refer to a change of 3 points on any PROMIS scale as clinically meaningful. Patients are also tracking a PROMIS measure that tracks GI symptoms. Again, this is also a multi-item survey that includes questions about loose stools, fecal urgency, bloody stools, and abdominal pain. Again, it's standardized with a mean of 50, and higher scores indicate greater GI symptoms. Another point to mention is that if the participant doesn't have enough data to provide results, the display or the results will return the following message that says, sorry, we don't have enough data to understand how you did to improve the different diets. If this happens to you in these cases, it's important to let the family know that, as we said at the beginning of the study, that frequent input of data was really critical to be able to run the statistical tests that compare the diets. So if there wasn't enough data to input to provide accurate feedback, the program won't calculate a result in order to prevent providing misinformation. So far, this hasn't been an issue, but it's something just to make you aware of in the event that you see this message. So now let's talk about how the overall organization of the results is in the platform. So the results review is organized with tabs that separate the results by symptom and then fecal calprotectin. And then there's a summary that provides a snapshot of the impact across symptoms. So as you can see, there's tabs for each symptom here, and then a tab for the summary of all symptoms. And when you're reviewing the results with the patient, you can review all symptoms, or you could really just focus on those that are most important to the family. If the child wasn't really having problems with stool frequency, maybe you don't want to measure, don't want to review that, or if they really didn't have a lot of problems with pain and they were having more problems with their composite GI symptoms, you'll want to look at that. When you click on any individual symptom, each symptom has 2 sections. So there's one section, did my stool frequency improve? And then another section, how sure can I be about this answer? And then when you click on the did my symptom, in this case stool frequency, improve, there's 2 panels, a left panel and a right panel. The left panel, the data shows the raw change in symptom measures across the diet phases. So here's the average stool frequency on the usual diet, the average stool frequency for all the days that the patient was on the specific carbohydrate diet, and the average stool frequency for all the days the patient was on the modified specific carbohydrate diet. The right panel is some text data that includes data showing differences in the symptoms across the 3 diet comparisons using statistical modeling that considers daily variation in the patient's symptoms and the change over time. So these numbers, just to make sure that you understand, can be different than if you just subtracted the averages that were provided in the bar graph. And the reason they can be different is because they're generated using modeling that is looking at daily variation in the patient's symptoms and change over time. And again, it's going to talk about those 3 different comparisons that are of interest to our patients. So 1 is the SCD compared to the usual diet. 2 is the modified SCD compared to the usual diet. And then the third comparison of interest is the modified SCD compared to the SCD. The second section, as I mentioned, is going to answer the question, how sure can I be about this answer? Data in this section is showing the probability that one diet is better than the other across those three critical dietary comparisons. So the likelihood that the SCD is better than your usual diet, the likelihood that the modified SCD is better than your usual diet, and the likelihood that the SCD is better than the modified SCD. Despite extensive testing, this section has really proven to be difficult to interpret for people. So we recommend that you focus your discussion on that first section we just talked about only. However, I'm going to go through the interpretation of this section in case patients ask you about it, because it will be included in the results printout that we have for you to give to them. So when you click on one of these comparisons about how sure can I be about this answer, there are three informative probabilities that you need to answer this question. So first, you need the chance that one diet is better than the other diet. And the way we've structured this, it needs to be better based on at least a 10% or a 1 standard deviation improvement. The second probability is the chance that that diet is worse than the other diet, again, based on at least 10% difference or 1 standard deviation different. And then there's also a chance that there's no difference between the two diets, or less than a 10% change or 1 standard deviation of improvement or worsening. When we give you the gauge in this results review, which you can see here, we give you the probability for A. So the chance that one diet, in this case, the modified SCD, is better than the other diet, in this case, the usual diet, based on at least that 10% or 1 standard deviation improvement. So there's a 20% chance that the modified SCD is better than the usual diet in this case. In the text, we repeat that probability. So you have a 21% chance that you showed improvement in your stool frequency on the modified SCD compared to the usual diet. We also give you the probability for B, the probability that you were actually worse on the modified SCD compared to your usual diet. In this case, that's a 40% chance your stool frequency actually got worse. The piece that we don't give you is the chance that there was actually no difference. However, you have the information you need to calculate that. So by subtracting A plus B from 100%, you can get that probability for C. So in this case, 100% minus 21% minus 40% gives you 39%. So there's a 39% chance that there was no difference. So in this case, there was a 21% chance that the modified SCD was better than the usual diet, a 40% chance that it was worse, and a 39% chance that it was no different. And again, you need all three probabilities to be able to interpret the results. We give you 2 of them. However, you do need to calculate that third to really be able to interpret these results. The final, or the second to last tab that is included in the results review includes the data for fecal calprotectin. The results that we have for this measure are a little bit more limited because we have less information available. So you'll have the graph of whether the fecal calprotectin improved. The usual diet, as you recall, just has a single fecal calprotectin measure because we only measure fecal calprotectin once during this diet phase. So you'll have just that result there. And then the bar for the SCD and the MSCD include the average of the 2 measurements that were obtained during the 2 periods on the SCD. So that would be the average of the fecal calprotectins on those 2 periods. And the modified SCD, this will give you the average of the 2 fecal calprotectins collected during those 2 periods. And then finally, there's the summary tab. And the summary tab allows the participant to review at a glance the impact of the diets on all the symptoms and on fecal calprotectin in one screenshot. Again, results are provided for the 3 major comparisons of interest. So the first being, what's the chance the SCD is better than the MSCD? The second is the SCD better than my usual diet? And the third is the MSCD better than my usual diet? And you click on each of those headings on the summary tab to get to the results for those questions of interest. And again, it's going to look the same for when I go through the results. However, this is set up, what diet's going to compare diet 1 to diet 2. So in that first comparison, it's SCD is diet 1 versus MSCD is diet 2. In the second comparison, SCD is diet 1 and usual diet's diet 2. And so I'm only going to go through the results once, but it's still that comparison. You just have to look at what the comparison is for diet 1 versus diet 2. So again, the results for each of the 3 questions are presented in the same format, and I'm just going to go through it once. But each question is structured to compare one diet, so like we just said, diet 1, to another diet, diet 2. So SCD versus MSCD, SCD versus usual, or MSCD versus usual. And the left panel in this graph shows the probability that that first diet, in this case the SCD, is at least 10% or 1 standard deviation better than diet 2, which in this case is the modified SCD, and it's looking at that by symptom. If the bar is green, there's a greater probability that diet 1 is better than diet 2. In this case, SCD is better than modified SCD. If the bar is red, which we don't see here in this example, there's a greater chance that diet 2 is better than diet 1. So in that case, modified SCD is better than SCD, or the converse, that the SCD is worse than the modified SCD. The higher the bar, the greater the probability that the diet is superior. So in cases where the bar is really, really short, like here for stool frequency or even here for GI symptoms, the greatest probability is actually that the diets weren't any different. So when you look at this at a glance, what you're looking at for is tall green bars. So the more tall green bars you have, the more symptoms that had a greater chance of improving versus worsening on diet 1 as compared to diet 2, or in this case, the SCD compared to the modified SCD. Again, just to emphasize that point, short bars mean, even if they're green, it's an unlikely chance that the SCD is better than the MSCD in this case, or diet 1 is better than diet 2. So you're really looking for tall bars. Short bars don't help you. It means it's unlikely that the diet is better, or it's likely that there's really no difference. So you're looking for bars in that possible range, so greater than the 30 to 40% range, or even higher, greater than 60%. So you're looking for tall green bars and ignoring short bars, whether they're green or red. The right panel on this summary graph shows the difference in fecal cal protectin between the 2 diets, between diet 1 and diet 2, again, in this case, SCD versus modified SCD. If the bar is green, it indicates that fecal cal protection was lower on the first diet, in this case, SCD. If the bar is red, it indicates that the fecal cal protectin was lower on diet 2, in this case, the modified SCD, or that it was increased on the SCD compared to the modified SCD. Again, the higher the bar, the greater the change in fecal calprotectin on the 2 diets. So in this case, you can barely see the bar because there was a small difference in fecal cal between the 2 diets. So now let's go through an example to make this a little bit clearer, hopefully. So here we're going to look at, did my stool frequency improve for this particular patient? Again, the left panel is giving you a bar graph that displays the average number of stools per day on the usual SCD and MSCD diet. So in this case, this particular patient had an average of 2.5 on the usual diet, an average of 2 on the SCD, and an average of 2.6 on the modified SCD. So to me, it looks like there's some decrease in stool frequency on the SCD compared to the usual diet and the MSCD. And there was minimal change on the MSCD as compared to the usual diet. Again, you could consider skipping the review of these results, since stool frequency wasn't much of an issue for this particular patient, even at baseline they were only having 2 stools or so a day. Now we'll look at the right panel. So again, just as a reminder, the right panel is the text that's quantifying the difference in average stool frequency across the diets using results that are generated by models that look at variation in symptoms from day to day and change over time. So again, the numbers here could be different than if you subtracted the averages in the bar graph. So the text is reading the SCD decreased your stool frequency by 0.5 stools compared to your usual diet. The modified SCD increased your stool frequency by 0.1 stools per day compared to your usual diet. So again, marginal increases on these. And compared to the modified SCD, the SCD decreased your stool frequency by 0.6 stools per day. So the way I would interpret this is that there's some decrease in stool frequency on the SCD as compared to the usual diet, minimal decrease in stool frequency on the MSCD compared to the usual diet, and some decrease in stool frequency on the SCD as compared to the MSCD. But again, you could consider skipping these results because the stool frequency really wasn't much of an issue for this participant. Okay, so now we're going to look at those probabilities again. So remember, there's 3 probabilities of interest. In this case, we're looking at the likelihood that the SCD is better than your usual diet for stool frequency. So we give you the chance that the SCD is better than your usual diet, again, based on at least a 10% improvement, and that probability is 76%. We also give you the probability that the SCD is worse than the usual diet based on at least 10% difference here in the text, and that's 4%. And then we can calculate the chance that there was no difference. And so if we do 100% minus 76% minus 40%, we get a 20% chance that there was no difference. So you can calculate all three probabilities. Now we answer that second question for this participant. What's the likelihood that the modified SCD was better than their usual diet? So again, we give you that first probability. So there's a 21% chance the MSCD was better than their usual diet. We give you a 40% chance that the MSCD was actually worse than their regular diet for stool frequency. And then we can calculate the chance that there was no difference. So a 39% chance that there was no difference. And then that third comparison is what's the likelihood that the SCD is better than the modified SCD for stool frequency. So again, there's a 93% chance the SCD is better than the modified SCD, a 1% chance that the stool frequency was better on the modified SCD, so meaning the SCD was worse than the MSCD, and then we can calculate that 6% chance that there was no difference. Now we're going to look at stool consistency for this participant. So again, the left panel is the bar graph and the right panel is the text. So if we look at these results combined, the percent of days with abnormal stools was lower on the SCD, 8% versus 2%, and lower on the MSCD, 8% versus 2% compared to the usual diet, and really no different between the SCD and the MSCD. Again, 8% of days with irregular stools is pretty low. You could consider skipping the results, the review of these results, since again, the stool consistency wasn't much of an issue for this participant. Now we're going to look at pain interference. Again, two panels, the bar graph panel and the text panel. So in this case, remember, we're looking at PROMIS scores. So the bar graph is displaying the average pain interference T-score or standardized score on the usual SCD and MSCD diets. Lower is better, and an average is 50. So in this case, and again, on the right panel, we have that text using the statistical modeling. So in this case, the average PROMIS pain interference score in the usual diet was 62, so much higher than that average of 50. It decreased to 40.2 on the SCD and 47.8 on the MSCD. And then you can see the text associated with that from the output from the models. So if I was interpreting this, I would make the interpretation that pain interference was lower on both the SCD and MSCD, and it was lower by more than 3 points, which is the clinically meaningful difference. And then if I was making the comparison between the SCD and the MSCD, it looks like pain interference was also lower on the SCD compared to the MSCD, and that was also by more than 3 points, which is clinically meaningful. So for pain interference, the patient did better on both diets compared to their usual diet, but it did seem that the specific carbohydrate diet was superior to the MSCD. Now looking at GI symptoms, again, the left panel is showing the bar graph that displays the average GI symptom T-score. Lower is better, average is 50, and then the right panel is that text quantifying the difference using the statistical model. So here again, the patient's PROMIS score was 57.1, so higher than 50, higher or worse than average. On their usual diet, it decreased to 48.9 on the specific carbohydrate diet and was slightly higher, if not about the same, on the MSCD. So what I would interpret this to mean is that the GI symptoms decreased substantially on the SCD compared to the usual diet using the model that was by 6.5 points. Symptoms were similar or maybe even worse on the MSCD and the usual diet. You can see the difference of about 1 point on the raw averages, and from the model output, it's by about 3 points, which would even be clinically significant. And then when you compare the modified SCD to the SCD, as you can see, GI symptoms were much better on the SCD than the MSCD, with the output of 9.5 points difference from the model, which is definitely clinically meaningful. And the final tab before the summary looks again at fecal calprotectin. So again, on the bar graph, you're going to have the single value for fecal calprotectin in the usual diet phase, provided along with the average of the two other measurements obtained during the two diet phases. So in this case, fecal calprotectin was lower on both the SCD and the MSCD compared to the usual diet, but was similar between the MSCD and the SCD. Okay, so now we're going to look at the summary. So by comparison. So again, remember there's three comparisons that are of interest. The first comparison that the data provides is the chance that the SCD is better than the MSCD. So again, the left panel is showing the probability that the SCD is at least 10% or 1 standard deviation better than the MSCD by symptom, and the right panel is showing the difference in fecal calprotectin. So in looking at this, for stool frequency, pain, and GI symptoms, we have tall green bars, giving us an idea that there's a high chance that the SCD is better than the MSCD. For stool consistency, we have a red bar, which might make you think the MSCD is in fact better than the SCD for stool consistency. However, because that bar is short, we really generally think that there's no difference. So if I was going to interpret these results, I would say it's very likely that the SCD improves stool frequency, pain interference, and GI symptoms as compared to the MSCD, and it's unlikely that it improves stool consistency, because there's only a 27% chance that the MSCD was better and a 62% chance, again, that there was no difference. When I look at the right panel for fecal calprotectin, you can barely see a bar, and that's really because there was no difference in fecal calprotectin on the SCD and the MSCD. So now I'm going to look at that second question. What's the chance that the SCD is better than the usual diet? And this might be a really important question for the patient to answer. Again, just looking at this, we have lots of tall green bars. We have tall green bars for stool frequency, for pain, and for GI symptoms, and a moderately high bar for stool consistency. And then we have, again, a high bar on the right for difference in fecal calprotectin between the SCD and the usual diet. So I would interpret this by saying it's very likely that the SCD improves stool frequency, pain interference, and GI symptoms compared to the usual diet. And it's unlikely but possible that it improves stool consistency. So there's a 48% chance that you can see by looking at that bar that the SCD was better than usual for stool frequency, and then a 46%, so similar chance that it was actually no different because that bar isn't as tall. And again, fecal calprotectin was much lower on the SCD than the usual diet. Now looking at that final comparison, the chance that the MSCD is better than the usual diet. In this case, we really only have one tall green bar showing that the pain seemed to be better on the MSCD as compared to the usual diet. And then we also have a tall green bar for fecal calprotectin. We have a moderate sized bar for stool consistency, meaning that maybe there's a chance that stool consistency was better on the MSCD compared to the usual. And then we have not particularly big bars for stool frequency or GI symptoms in the opposite direction, indicating that probably there's no difference or a slight increase in probability that GI symptoms were actually worse on the MSCD. Although again, not a very tall bar. So if I was interpreting this, I would say it was likely that the MSCD improved pain interference, and possible that it improved stool consistency at 48% compared to the usual diet. And it's possible that it actually worsened stool frequency that you can see there. But the greatest chance is that, in fact, it was no different. And possibility that the MSCD worsened GI symptoms. Again, there's an 85% chance that the MSCD was either worse or no different, although we did see improvements in fecal calprotectin. So maybe some reductions in fecal calprotectin, but not a lot of reductions on the symptoms on the MSCD other than pain interference. So my overall impression for this patient is that it's likely the SCD improved a range of symptoms as compared to the usual diet. And while the MSCD might have improved pain interference, it appears to have worsened stool frequency and perhaps GI symptoms as compared to the usual diet. And again, the SCD appeared superior to the MSCD on most outcomes that matter, particularly pain interference and GI symptoms, and that both diets reduced fecal calprotectin compared to the usual diet. So now as you think about, there's a lot of information there in the results. So as we think about how you want to approach reviewing this patient, reviewing the results with patients, we recommend that you use the Eureka platform and you bring up the main results review page with the symptom tab. And you ask the participant which symptoms are most important to them, and you review those. Again, we're recommending that you only review the sections on did my symptom improve, as opposed to delving into those probabilities, because they have been a little bit difficult for people to interpret. But if you have a particularly interested family who likes probabilities and likes numbers, they will have that information on the printout, and you can go through it with them on the screen or on the printout. Always review the fecal calprotectin tab, because that's of interest to people. And then we do recommend that you always review the summary tab as a last step, looking for those tall green bars. It gives you a nice general gestalt as to how the patient did across symptoms and fecal calprotectin in one snapshot. We also want to encourage you, after we make the results review available, before your participant comes in to review the results, please reach out to us if you have any questions. We are available to help you with interpretation of the results if you need it. The study statistician is also available to weigh in if you need assistance with interpreting the results. We are always here for you, so please reach out with any questions.